Welcome to another in our series of ePermits info webinars, the subject of this one being the ePermits electronic signatures module. The electronic signatures module enhances the use of your existing ePermit system, enabling permit documents to be issued and closed on a device such as a smartphone or an iPad or any tablet device, as long as it has access to the internet. An issuer can sign a permit, and a contractor can sign acceptance of permits at the point or time of issue in exactly the same way as you would receive, for example, an Amazon parcel at your front door. Someone will fill in and sign at their end saying they've delivered, and you will then sign and say you've actually received. And that's the process that it will go through. So it's exactly the same type of process. Same would happen at the end of a job. A contractor can sign the return of a permit, and the closer or technical authority can also sign for closure of those permits at the time. But it can be done from a desk or anywhere appropriate because it does lend itself to being ideal for remote working or for use on unmanned sites. There are some limitations within the system for remote working or unmanned sites, in that the issuing individual is the only one that actually has access to the signature pages within ePermits. Very often, contractors that are on site are not actually ePermits users with logins, so they do not have access to the pages to actually sign the documents. So in those situations, what will happen is that the issuer will sign the permit document and issue that permit document, and there won't be a physical signature on the document from the contractor. But there are processes that we can go through, and I'll explain in the demonstration to show how you can minimize any issues with regard to that, but still enable permits to be issued remotely, which again is very beneficial in terms of requirement for unmanned sites. So the ePermits electronic signatures is part of a module family that comes within the ePermits environment. The core modules of permit workflow, RAMS compliance, contractor compliance, and working compliance are all the same. But now we have a number of additional modules. In the worker compliance space, we have a video and induction test module and a PPE module. And the PPE module is subject to another info webinar that's available at our website. Electronic signatures is the one we're talking about today. We have international modules for clients that use the system all around the world. And we have other modules such as automatic permit splitting, enabling the system to split permits up based on any shift rules that you may have. And there are various other modules as well. If you have any interest in any of those modules, by all means, you can contact me or your ePermits contact either through support or through your project implementation team, and any of us will be willing to help you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run a very simple demonstration of the system that will allow us to show you how electronic permits can be electronically signed and how to manage that area of remote working. So as a contractor, I'm going to log into the system. We've been asked to come in and do a particular piece of work, and we'll go through our normal practice of saying who we're coming in to work for, who's actually going to come in to do the work, have I got a works order number, who's the competent person, who's coming in on the team, do we have to put in a vehicle registration number, and when am I going to do the work? So let's say we're doing the work on that day between 10 and let's say 5. Next step. And now we're in a situation where, as you know and love, you fill in information about what it is you're coming to work on. So I'm coming in to work on a particular piece of kit, and as you know, the system will automatically populate information about where that particular piece of kit is. I'm going to come in and do some repair work. I'm going to be actually doing some loading a plate on the cover of the boiler. It's a business services fault, and there's my RAMs that are applicable to the job, and I'm going to be doing welding and brazing as my high risk activity. So there's the information on there. If you have the PPE module, which was a subject to another webinar that you can take a look at, you can of course have this information filled in, or you can fill in the information about what equipment you're actually going to be bringing on site, and the equipment can be pertinent to any of the high-risk activities that the system has picked up. So the more high risks that I ticked, the more slots would be in the PPE module, and I'll be able to specify the PPE I'm bringing particularly for managing that particular risk. So if I submit this permit request, I'm coming in, I'm going to do the hot works at a particular time, let's say 12 until 1. And if I take that off, I've now done my job. I can now submit my permit request. And my job as the contractor is done. I've now got some requests out there that are waiting approval. So there's my 2 permits, access and hot works for the 31st of March. So if I now log in as an approver, this chap, Howard Aubrey, is an approver. He's had an email sent through to him saying there are permits that are awaiting his approval. So he can log into the system, and there are his requests awaiting approval. He's got a number out there, but here are the 2 that we're looking at the moment, access and the hot works permit. So we would go through the normal review process. So we look at what's actually happening. Do we have any clashes? Can I review the RAMs so I can actually see what is specified to be done? I can bring in isolations. Do I want a security escort? Yes, I do want a security escort for this particular job. PPE, I can specify any PPE that may not have been specified by the contractor. I can say, for example, I actually need everybody to be wearing face masks, which is pertinent at this particular stage of the year, given the current COVID-19 incidents. So if I'm happy with the permit request, I can approve it. Using my own password, which now audit trails it to me. And that permit has now been approved. Similarly with the hotworks permit, same information about clashes. I can review the RAMs. I can bring in isolations. This is my safety checklist. Here's my PPE list again, so I can add to that PPE list should I need to. But if I'm happy with the permit request, approve it, and it's done. So that's just going through standard stuff that you will all know, because it needs to get us to a point where we've got some approved permits. And here we now have the 2 permits that we're talking about with regard to this job. Now, if we fast forward to the 31st, to next week, and the contractor turns up on site to do the work, this is where we now have some options. I can, for example, contractor has turned up. So this is the security desk or your permit desk. Are they the right people? Yes or no. If they're not, you can change the teams. It'll rerun all training and competency checks on anybody else that's not been on that list. If it's all approved, the name of the person's changed and everything updated on the permit. If the person that's turned up is not qualified to do the work, send them home. I can review RAMs at this stage. I can bring in isolations at this stage. There's the security escort. Yes, it is required. Double check on that. We have got the PPE, so I can get the guys to do a kit check. And we're now in a situation where I can now either generate this permit, and this will now generate for me a PDF document, which is blank. So no signatures on this. This is exactly the way that most permits clients have done this for many, many years, in that they would now have a PDF document that they can print off with all the relevant information on there. So there's the checklist for the safety precautions for the access. Yes, security escort is required. And this is where it's been approved by Howard. It's not been issued or signed by any individual person. It's not been received. This is where we would go through now the wet signature process by printing this document off and either pinning it up at the place of work or having it in Steve's back pocket. And at the end of the process, he'll need to return it. And then also that permit document would need to be closed off. Or we can go through an electronic signature method. And you can actually mix and match. So just because you have the electronic signatures module doesn't mean you can't print off the permit documents as well. So I could now, for example, sign this. So as the authorized issuer, I'm Howard. I have now signed that, and the person in charge, Steve, has picked it up. I can now reprint that permit. This will now give me an electronic version with electronic signatures in there. So go to those. And now we've got that information where it's been issued by Howard and it's been picked up by Steve, and it's all date and time stamped within there. These grey areas are the areas where you put your liability statements. So you can specify, for example, here, Howard has said he has confirmed that he's personally checked safety precautions are in place. Steve accepts responsibility for the work. I've read the RAMs. All my team are going to work only on the job specified. Whatever you want these liability statements to be, they can be within the system. So what can happen now is that permit document and a copy of the RAMs, as you see below, this can now be emailed to Steve Chandler. So if he's challenged on site, he can show that he has a permit document. It's been signed by Howard, and it's also been signed by himself. So he's a legitimate reason to be on site. I can close that off, and that's the standard process of doing it. And that's typically done at the security desk or the permit desk. There may be a tablet on that desk, which the issuer will sign and pass it over to Steve, and then Steve would sign that as well. Now, when it comes to the hotworks, probably hotworks is not a great example to use here, but let's say we have a situation where there has to be remote working, or it is an unmanned site. So how do we actually go through the process here? The process here can be done again through the electronic signatures side. There's the information about it. This is the safety checklist that needs to be gone through. So in a remote working situation, you can get Steve to switch on his mobile phone and actually show you the place of work. So you can go through things like checking, have they been isolated? You and Steve are checking these off, even though you're not physically in that same place at the same time. Will at least 2 people and a hosiery will be available at any particular time? Have the gas cylinders been properly secured? You go through the safety checklist exactly the same way as if you were actually on site with him, but you're actually looking at it either through a video screen. You could actually get him to record that video and then send it to you, and you could upload that into the e-permit system as well. You can get him to actually turn the camera on himself, and you can also cross-check the PPE, again, if you've got the PPE list. But now if I save that information, we're now in a position where we can sign this off. Now, Howard can sign this off. Steve does not actually have access to this particular screen. You have to be a login user to be able to access these things, and very often the contractors that are on site are not login users to the e-permit system. And it is actually the issuer that has this in exactly the same way as, again, using your guy at Amazon, he has an electronic device in his hands. He will then sign it, and then he will pass it to you for signature on that same device. So in this situation, Steve actually doesn't have access to be able to sign this, but Howard has signed this off. So now if we look at this particular version of the permit, I will now see that I only have Howard's signature on the document. So there's the safety checklist that we've been through, and there's Howard's signature, and Steve's signature does not appear on here with either a date or a timestamp either. This is where it will be important for remote working that you have specific types of liability statements here, where Howard is accepting a lot of the liability, saying, yes, I have checked everything off with Steve Chandler. We've done it via video, whatever terminology you want to put in there, but you can put those in. And this is now a valid permit document that can be sent out with your own people taking the responsibility. I can now email that to Steve, and he now has a copy of the document with the issuer's signature on that document. So close this, and now we actually issue that permit. We're now in a situation where we've got live jobs out there. Steve is out there working, but remember, the only documents that he does not have his signature on there, but Howard should not have signed that document unless he was personally happy and satisfied that everything that was possible to be done has been done to ensure the safety of the contractors. Now, when we come backwards, now the job is finished, we're going to close this permit off. We're in a situation now we want to close it. Again, in a situation of remote working or an unmanned site, this will be done again by video on the contractor's phone. They can actually show you the place of work. You can go through a checklist here where you can specify whether or not the job has been done properly. They can then send you that video, and you can upload video documents to the closure process. And you're sitting at your desk, the contractor's there on site. So when we're in this situation now, we're looking at signing it. Again, the person in charge is Steve. He actually can't sign that. He actually can't sign that. Sorry. So now it's Howard who actually signs this off. And now when we view that permit document, we're now in a position where we have the completed permit document, but again, done remotely with Howard's signature here. And, oh, sorry, I must have put a dot in there. And then Howard's signature on the closure of that particular permit document. So this is now the completed permit document from electronic signature perspective with regards to remote working. If I now go through the process on the access permit, where we're looking at now, this is now Steve Chandler handing it back at the security desk, and the security guard or the FM team at the permit desk, again, signing this out. We now have a completed permit document with all the electronic signatures on there. In that way. So the electronic signatures module does provide you with the ability to make the whole process paperless. It does not mean that you don't have the ability to produce paper documents if you need to. It also has the ability to help you in those situations where you have remote working, in a sense of being able to have the issuer and the closer sign off those permit documents, even though the contractor is not able to sign them off. You could do a hybrid. You could, for example, give the contractor a hard copy of that permit document. They could sign off their bit, their end, and then they scan it and upload it to you at the back end of the process. So you've actually then got, as it were, two documents, one with your signatures on it and one with their signatures on it. So there are various ways that you can get around the problem. It's not a perfect solution, but for remote working, that situation works adequately for many of our customers at this point in time. So that now concludes the webinar on the electronic signatures module. If you have any questions, by all means contact either myself or anybody in the permits support or implementation team that are on your list of contacts. Thank you very much.